everyone, I'm Carl Bierock. Welcome to the Jaguar Football Podcast. And today we have a very special guest. We have Kurt Boyer from Mississippi Magazine here to talk football, not only Seckman football, but also Jefferson County football and what he has seen over the last decade or so covering local sports. So, Kurt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Carl. Um, it's a real honor and a privilege to be here. I don't think I've ever taken on a podcast of any uh, football program as prestigious and as large as the Seckman Jaguars of Class 6. So this is kind of an upgrade for me.
Well, thank you so much for carving time out of your schedule to join us. We certainly enjoy your writing, and we'll dig into that a little bit in the podcast. But wanted to start off and talk about the resurgence, or you can call it the rise of football in Jefferson County. Wanted to get your thoughts on that. You had some pretty astute observations about how just not only you think about the schools on the northern end of the county that are seeing success here as of late, but also the schools that are just smack dab in the middle of the county. They're seeing success as well.
We're seeing success from large schools and small schools and everybody in between. We're seeing obviously success with the large schools like Seckman, Hillsborough, Festus. Um, we're seeing schools that we thought the programs might be kaput. Schools where we thought where the program was kaput for a short time, or where they didn't even have Friday night lights for a brief time, like Grandview and Crystal City, where the field got flooded out, and the team had 14 kids in 2019, 2020, and we just wondered, is this the end of the proud tradition of Crystal City football? And now you turn around 5 years later, they're one of the best underdog stories in the state. Um, I think that we have a chance this season to. I don't know that obviously everybody would want to talk about how Highway A, not just Jeffco, but Highway A has sent back-to-back teams to the Show Me Bowl, albeit in losses the last 2 years. But two crosstown rivals, Festus and Hillsborough, or Hillsborough and Festus going back-to-back. But I don't know that this is a year. I don't know that 2025 is a year where another Show Me Bowl appearance is going to happen for um, any of our dirty dozen 12 teams in Jeffco, as we call them at Mississippi Magazine. But I do think this is the year where other bigger things are going to happen. And I think we can get into that a little bit because I think there's a new prestige here. I think that combined with the success of St. Louis, I think this area somehow is becoming a hotbed. And I think that our local games and our conference games and our district games are all going to come up in importance. And with that, we don't necessarily have to feel so much pressure to succeed in the state playoffs. I think that if we have double-digit good teams and lots of really prestigious games in our local sphere that are well covered and well played, I think that any state success will just be icing on the cake.
Yeah, and with you covering high school sports for so long, do you think that there maybe is a bias that Jefferson County football isn't on the same level as maybe a St. Louis County or a St. Charles County, for that matter?
Well, I definitely think that things have changed in a short time. I think as of 5 years ago, I think if there was any bias um, against Jefferson County football or people underrating us, I guess is what you're asking. Um, I think it might have been a little bit deserved at that point. um, as of or I should say 6 years ago, as of pre-COVID, the 2019 season, I remember that Mississippi Magazine goes until the season is over for all 12 of our teams, and our seasons are getting longer now because the teams are getting so much better. We've sent 2 and 3 teams at a time to week 13 and beyond. I remember in 2019 we had 3 teams in the district semifinals at week 11, and they were all underdogs, and they all got beat, and that was it. And so, we wrapped up after 11 weeks. So, maybe that was kind of the rock bottom, low point for competitive pigskin in our area, but um, it's come up so fast, and people have a hard time adjusting. Casual fans across the state might have heard of 100 or 200 different high school football teams. It takes a lot of success and a lot of boundaries to be broken before people start going, oh, maybe they got something to offer over there. But I definitely think that after the last 2 years, after the success of so many large and small schools in Jefferson County, I think that our games can't help but see a new level of prestige at this point.
That's good to hear. I know that the programs here in the area, they're professional, they work hard, they practice, and it's good to see, essentially floats all boats. It raises all boats. Having solid programs in the northern end of the county, central Jefferson County, even southern Jefferson County, seeing programs that are a little bit smaller on the scale have success in the playoff level, and some even go as far as state. So we're all excited to see teams succeed in Jefferson County, and of course we root for them whenever we're not playing them. But it's just so nice to see the other teams find success. And you mentioned a few teams there. Any other teams in particular? You think about Hillsboro; they had some success here in the last couple of years. Obviously, Festus had a very long run in the playoffs here recently. Who else do you see as maybe a team, not necessarily to, maybe people shouldn't sleep on and keep an eye on?
Well, I think that senior night at Crystal City last year, when Grandview came to Crystal City and they were throwing bombs for touchdowns against each other in the first quarter. I'm sure there were a lot of defensive coaches at Crystal City and Grandview that weren't very big fans of that. But it was such a proud moment because here was 2 teams that had just come, 2 programs that came out of nowhere and that people had really written off as being scuttled, like, okay, they're going to play 8-man football or something. They can't do this anymore. And to go there and see 2 winning teams, or I guess Grandview didn't quite pull off the winning record last year, but they have posted some winning records since the revival at Grandview and since COVID. And to see those 2 teams just flourishing and really just still on their way up was amazing. Crystal City going to the Final 8 in 2 consecutive seasons as the smallest Class 1, not just a Class 1 program, but the smallest Class 1 program, based on enrollment size. And they've gone to the Elite 8, as it were, in 2 straight years. What I'm most excited about this season is some of the underdogs and some of the up and coming teams that I think we could maybe even have double digit really good teams in the county. DeSoto, lots of people are saying it, but it's still true. What Coach Rush Schmidt has done at DeSoto is fantastic. DeSoto's kids have a whole new level of motivation and work ethic, and everybody's on board, all for one, with the program. Only 5-4 last year, but it was hard earned, and they took on some good teams. Nearly took down North County in the playoffs, and we thought, wow, here was a team that was fumbling to Bishop DeBerg 2 years ago, the DeSoto Dragons, and then they come out and not only contend in the conference but in the district playoffs as well. Coach Schmidt was underrated as a chalkboard guy. He made up just a really pretty new wide field version of the same wing tee offense that Festus used to run when he was there. and it's given DeSoto so many more contributors on offense. It made it so much more fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing an even better DeSoto team this year. Obviously, Northwest with Mr. Cohen Stark at quarterback, they were just a joy to watch at the end of last season, coming from behind to beat Oakville. Um, I think that obviously Fox is still there. We forget that Fox is one of our Final Four teams, and we can brag on our teams, going to state or going to the Final Four. I know, obviously Jefferson High did as well in the same season. We can't forget about the COVID year and seeing Fox almost go all the way and seeing Jefferson almost go all the way. St. Pius, another up and coming team. Um, I don't know that we have too many stinkers in the bunch now that Lee Freeman is the head coach at Windsor, and we've all got high hopes for the Windsor Owls too. I think that we could have double-digit, really good teams in Jefferson County pretty shortly.
Love to hear that and love to see that because again, I think it just makes everyone better. To see them succeed off the field and on the field like that, it just makes the county that much more formidable when it comes to just talking football in the St. Louis metro area. And really, we're still here in the preseason phase. I don't think a lot of programs have got on the field much, but you're hard at work putting together a 2025 preview. I was wondering if you can give us a little sneak peek about what you have planned for your magazine as we go into the next season.
Well, we never really know how we're going to mix up the preseason content until we get there. I do try to make it a little bit different every year. This year, we're going to obviously doing a lot more video. And thanks to you and some other folks that are kindly enough to be helping out, we're hoping to have a little bit more video and a little bit more YouTube stuff going out. But I don't just want it to be me talking. I want to have, uh, help some of these teams that we've seen that have really changed their mentality on putting highlights and content out on their players. Um, that would be, and you mentioned, I couldn't agree with you more that a rising tide lifts all boats, as they say. Um, and hopefully we're going to see that in the promotion end as well, and of teams just getting the word out about what they do and who their kids are, and showing us some of their highlights and not having it all on pay-per-view and stuff like that. I see now some positive changes taking place at a number of schools like St. Pius and Crystal City that are just doing a lot more to put the kids out there. And once again, that was something that had to change. In the 2010s, Jefferson County was full of coaches that they didn't like the internet. They didn't like putting highlights out. I knew kids from teams that weren't allowed to put their highlights out or put a profile on the internet. The coach would tell them that's selfish. We can't do that. We put highlights out. That's selfish. We're all about a team. We're not about the hype and all this stuff. I guess everybody wants to be Oregon's head coach, beating Colorado or something. But you have to understand when you're a high school varsity program, you have to make some hype. You have to put the word out there. You can't just be a ghost page on the internet. And we've seen a lot more people, taking an active interest, and they want to put the kids out. They want to show the fruits of their labor and let the kids feel good about making a highlight reel together, not about just one kid's highlight reel, but making a highlight reel together. So we're hoping that the coaches that are leading by example can help some of the teams that we see that, still don't really put that much information out or don't have enough buzz and enough fanfare, going into each Friday.
You bring up a good point because that's really not to get into to do like self promotion shamelessly, but that's really how this podcast started. It started from just Coach Bear at the end of each season. We have a banquet, much like every other football program does. And he highlights a play or two and breaks down how a player, like especially a senior, contributed. And like, wow, that's like really good stuff. And so we wanted to incorporate that into this and also break down that fourth wall, so to speak. They maybe they know coach from seeing him on a Friday on the sideline, but to hear him talk about, what the boys are going through, what's important, reminding them about the playbook and the importance of lifting weights and taking care of yourself, all those things, it just gives another vehicle to help spread the good word of the program. And, that's how, we arrived on the spot. But I certainly understand that, you have to kind of take this into your own hands and not rely on maybe like your typical, media outlets, because they're shrinking. There's not as many around, and, it's hard to compete, for that either space in the newspaper or coverage on TV or on the radio.
Yeah, that was. I certainly agree. That was the major adversity last year, was when regional radio was sort of bought out by, corporate alpha media or whatever it was, and just went to this sort of generic national programming, not just on the radio on Friday nights, but on their websites and their social media too. And um, I remember thinking, Park Hill Central wins the state championship. Hillsboro finishes runner up in the same season. And then less than 6 months later, KJEF and KFMO radio were both kaput, or KFMO Sports and KJEF Sports are both kaput. So I was proud of how the community came through that. It was kind of a scramble, if that makes any sense. I think it kind of, everybody just had to kind of scramble and figure out, like, okay, there were even nights when the national programming on AM 1400 and Festus would get just mysteriously cut off at 7:05, and there was Hal Neisler doing a football game. you know and then when the football game ended, right on the dot, they just switch it back to Jesse Waters, or whoever. So that was weird, but it was neat to see everybody just kind of like improvising and coming up with a way, because we knew this was too special to miss. There's been so much success and so many great stories in the past 2 or 3 years of local football, that I think there was a feeling that we can't let this go to waste. We got to get it out there. So um, that was neat to see.
Yeah, and real quick, Kurt, like, what is a story that really sticks out in your mind in the last couple of years that is just ingrained in you? It's like, boy, you know what? I was glad either to be there in person and see it, or just write about it in your magazine.
Oh, there have been so many. Um, we've already talked about Crystal City, which is a program that I really fell in love with. Um, a lot of people always accuse the Gridiron Geek of just being like, pro Festus or pro Tri Cities. And I guess you can't avoid that. I've had TV sports announcers tell me that um, they can sit there and announce a whole game and just do what they do. And after the game, one team's fans will be accusing them of being biased for these guys, and then vice versa. These guys are accusing them of being biased for the other one. And so I guess you're always going to get that. But we have tried to broaden the horizons and kind of say, like, okay, this is a magazine for the whole county. And I guess that um, not just the story of Coach Schmidt going to DeSoto, but just kind of the way that whole thing worked out. Like Coach Schmidt going back to Hillsboro for a short time, being a part of, uh, well, like you said earlier, you don't necessarily want to call it a renaissance, because these teams are going above and beyond what, I mean, Hillsboro was always great, but it's more than a revival, because these kids that we have now are taking it to a whole other level. But he was able to go and be a part of that and kind of kiss and make up at Hillsboro a little bit, where they had some rancor in the past. And then so that all worked out great. And then he goes to DeSoto and starts rebuilding a team that once again everybody kind of had given up on. And then here they come with a winning season out of nowhere. So um, he Coach Schmidt was replaced by Coach Ofadale at Festus, was a move that a lot of people had mixed feelings about, including myself. Um, and so to see it kind of work out for both of them, and to see um, Coach Ofadale kind of building on the success of Coach Schmidt at Festus, as opposed to, keeping most of the Coach Schmidt assistants that were on the coaching staff there and building together with them. And meanwhile, the guy who laid the foundation for the success at Festus goes to DeSoto and begins building a whole new tradition there, and using one of my favorite offenses. I mean, you just can't beat it.
No, we appreciate you sharing some of your favorite stories that you covered. And of course, we'd be remiss not to have you talk about Seckman football. And, I'm looking here at the image. So it was a nice clear night on a Friday. Stands were packed. Before you know it, the Jaguar Nation will be filling the stands once again. Wanted to get your thoughts on how you perceive the 2025 version of the Seckman Jaguars as they start to gear up for the season.
Well, I heard Coach Bear on your podcast. I think it might have been last week, and he wasn't complaining. He was being humble and saying, we don't have a lot of NCAA talent. We don't have a lot of outstanding athletes. I don't know how many of our players are going to play past 17, and so on. Well, Coach does tend to be very modest like that, and that's I always think it's a smart move to kind of play yourself down and play up the opposition as much as you can. But you don't need Kirkwood or Nixa's number of college prospects to be successful in high school football, even in Misha Class 6. What you need is a formula for winning. And I think that, from what I can see, as much as anybody might lament, some of the kids that are leaving, like you always do with the graduations, I see a team that might just be bigger and stronger and even a little bit older up front than they have been, even over these last few years. I'm looking at the heights and weights and the ages of these Seckman Jaguar linemen, and I'm seeing a line that could potentially line up a lot like an NCAA team at the line of scrimmage this year. And I mean, the skill players will be important, the playbook will be important, and the finesse and the special teams and the passing game and all that stuff. But I continue to think that the key for Seckman to really getting over the hump and getting into the state playoffs as opposed to the district playoffs is to become even more dominant at the line of scrimmage. And I think that they have a chance to do that this year.
Yeah, on that very same podcast, we highlighted that the coach does an annual barbecue with the seniors, and this is the largest senior class as far as we know, going back in history. So it even larger than the previous years. So I think you're right. There's a lot of senior leadership, a lot of big guys up front that will help dictate, the play calling and what happens on the field.
Yeah, it's a big senior class in size, and it's a big senior class in number, and that's really the best of both worlds. Um, I'm curious to know if there's any youngsters that maybe you would know of who are coming up who could compare to like a Carson Schutte, or am I pronouncing his name right?
I believe so. Yes.
Lineman,
Yeah.
okay, or Ben Eplin, or some of these big senior linemen. Um, because in fact, I might have to come to a Seckman game very early in the season at home and try to get my hands on a program, because sometimes it seems like every roster that you find on the internet is just chronically incomplete, no matter how much information is on it. And it's great because the Seckman huddle roster has probably over 100 kids on it, or last I checked, it was just overflowing number of kids, which is the first and foremost ingredient to maintaining the success of the team, is maintaining the numbers. But it almost seems like there's got to be more. If I can find enough profiles of athletes who just look like these tremendous junior and senior bruisers in the line of scrimmage, I feel like there's got to be more where that came from. And that if you talk to Coach Bear and, got him in a candid moment, he'd say, well, I got a freshman, or I got this sophomore who's lifting weights, and, stuff like that. And having even more, kids coming up to provide depth and to buoy the offensive and defensive line. I know that Dylan Lappy is a kid who just looks like the prototype of an edge player that that high school, not just high school coaches, but college coaches want now. I know last year at Festus there was a kid named Owen Gardner who I didn't really expect him to start at defensive end because he only weighed 200 pounds. And I thought, why would you start a kid on the defense? Nothing against him. Why would you start a kid on the defensive line who weighs 200 pounds when you got 7 defensive linemen who were 250 or bigger who can rock and roll? But Coach O wanted that speed and that lateral quickness out there. And he wanted that prototype of a 200-pound edge player who can chase down a quarterback or chase down a running back. And Owen Gardner had a fantastic year. I couldn't have been wronger about wanting to have a bigger offensive line. The defensive line that Festus had was just fine, obviously in 2024. So I think Dylan is a prototype of one of those edge players, and I think once again that's going to ultimately, when it comes to stopping an offense like Jackson, or even stopping an offense like Pattonville at its peak, I think that there's not going to be anything more important than winning the line of scrimmage and getting that edge rush in on the quarterback. And I think Seckman might just be at the peak of their defense this year, where they can pull that off against even some of those great passing teams that they've always kind of tripped up against.
Yeah, I'm excited as well to see how it plays out. And Kurt, of course, you have an invite to come out to our annual Blue Gold game. It's our scrimmage, so want to get a sneak peek of the season, be my guest and, come on out and see it. But no, we'd love to have you at a game. And, certainly, there's just a lot of work that remains before we start the season. Obviously they haven't really put on the pads yet and gone out there, but we're just excited, and we appreciate you, chiming in about Festus and Hillsborough, and even here at Seckman about how the programs have improved, because it's just great to see all these programs succeed, and we talked about all those reasons why. So real quick, Kurt, how do they find your website? We'll put a link in our description of this podcast, but how do they find you online?
Well, we have a homepage called the Geeks Mississippi Magazine, and or the Gridiron Geeks Mississippi Magazine, but the URL is just going to be the geeksmississippi-magazine.com. And we had a terrible incident last year where it got our server failed and it got taken offline for a long time, but we're back and ready for business this summer. And we also have a wonderful contingent on our Facebook group, which is just Facebook/Misha Football. And it's called Fans of Misha Football and the Gridiron Geek. Pardon me. And that's been just really taking off over the past 2 years beyond my wildest imagination. I mean, we have almost 1,000 group members now, and they do a lot to promote the boys too. So it's just tremendous to have the outpouring of support that we've had on Facebook.
It's always a good read, so I encourage everyone to check out those pages. And again, we'll put the link in there, and also upcoming events with the Seckman Jaguars. We talked about the Blue Gold game. We have the annual cornhole tournament, donuts and decals. We'll keep you posted, everybody, about what's going on in Seckman football on our social media channels. But Kurt, we always give our guests the opportunity to close us out. Wanted to get your final thoughts, not just about Seckman, but again, the football in general, this half hour always goes by so quickly. And I feel like we covered a lot of
Oh,
ground, but wanted to give you the floor and have you take us out.
well, you're putting me on the spot. Um, and I certainly didn't have closing statement prepared or anything like that. In fact, the phone is ringing. Let me hide it and pitch it away. Um, I think that um, once again, you've heard this said 1,000 times. Your friendly country sports writer is supposed to kind of put this in the paper in late August. But any game that you go to in Jefferson County this year has the possibility of being a gem. There aren't going to be many boring games. Somebody invites you to a high school football game this year around here, and you think, oh, it might be kind of boring. Well, no. We have a new level of performance. We have a new level of coaching, a new level of prestige, and there just aren't going to be that many boring games around here. So you hear it all the time, but it's true. Go to your local football field and see what they have to offer this time because it could really it's been special and it could continue to be special here in the 2020s.
Kurt, well said, and really appreciate your insight and coming on the podcast today. And certainly, we look forward to more updates as you put out your 2025 season preview, and then as we go into the season, your recaps of the game. So, thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Carl. Go Jaguars.
All right, take care.